Hello everyone, continuing the series of Two at a Time. Today we are here to discuss the part 3, which will cover topics 2 and 6 of the recently conducted Civil Services Mains Examination essay paper. The topic 2 of section A and topic 6 of section B is that what we are going to cover today in this video. So let's start the discussion. So, the topic 2 of section A was supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu has given this quote, right? It's a very famous quote, and I think in the pretext and the context of all what was happening right now and even the previous months, especially from you could say April, May to the aspect of even the months of June, July, August, the concept, the theme of war has taken importance, right? And I think whatever is happening on the global level, the theme of war will be very important. So this topic is not just important from your essay perspective as the previous year question, but of course it is equally important for the ideas which can be asked in your ethics paper. And of course, people who have humanities optionals like PSIR or other topics also, yes, they will be able to use the content what I'm going to discuss today. Okay, so it's not just with reference to that whatever I'm going to discuss today will be relevant to the essay. No, you will learn a lot of things and a lot of ideas which you can use over a lot of your GS papers. Okay, and even in the future some different essay topics. Okay, so again, our topic is what? The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, and I hope you are able to see the writings clearly. Yes? Okay? Okay, let's proceed. So, now, as as always, I have always emphasized upon the keywords on understanding the theme and the essence. So, this first, aspect is that whenever you read a topic, please understand that what are the important keywords, key phrases, and start thinking of the ideas that are coming into your mind, not from the example perspective. I'm again telling you that if you are just thinking from example perspective, then you are just limiting yourself. Start thinking from the perspective of what different ideas, what different arguments I could write. What does it mean? What is this topic's interpretation or the extraction from the topic that I could understand. So that's your first step to be able to write a good essay. So let's focus on the keywords. Of course, war, art of war, right? We cannot deny art of war and war. Subdue enemy without fighting. So yes, you are able to understand that these are the keywords. What is the category or the theme under which I could put this topic? The theme, of course, is war, just like I mentioned. Then you could also keep it under, because it says that the supreme art of war is to subdue your enemy without fighting. So without direct confrontation, without use of brute force, you can use diplomacy to subdue your enemy. This also tells us the ingenuity, the human ingenious mind, right? So ingenuity of human mind. It also tells us about pragmatism, because we know that war costs us a lot of things. It costs human life, it costs resources, right? So, and it can also destabilize the country's political, social, and even the economic system. So pragmatism is also, which says that as far as possible, be prepared for war, but try and avoid war. So that is what is pragmatism all about. Then you also have the theme of realpolitik, right? And you could understand from here. Now, this theme and the essence, yes, the first thought that will come into my mind is that this topic is talking about the concept of war. So yes, I would be writing over here war as a word. Now, what I'm thinking, the ingenious use of human mind, wisdom over brute force, because the topic is sort of trying to tell you that it's better to fight your enemy, not in the direct fighting in the sense of a battlefield or so, but maybe use other tactics to actually defeat your enemy. So the ingenious use of human mind, wisdom over brute force, right? Brain over muscle. Is that what, these ideas were coming into my mind when I was thinking about the topic. Then, of course, what does it mean? The new age tactics of war. Are we actually getting down on the battlefield and, fighting with our enemies? No. We are using some different tactics. We are using some different techniques, which of course, the most famous ones, or I would say the most notorious ones, are these cyber attacks. Then you have even the diplomacy tactics, where a country tries to dominate the other country either through exertion of its economic powers, like, putting trade barriers, trade tariffs, like what is happening right now, right? So the arm twisting diplomacy is also one more thing. Then you have the capitalists and the MNCs, that means the multinational companies, the multinational corporations, and the capitalists. They also have a role to play in influencing many decisions. So small countries, because these MNCs, they are not even, multinational, they have become literally, spread out over the entire world. So their influence, their exertion of power is so, huge, and their revenue systems, or their, finances are actually stronger than most of the nations. So in a way, these are also trying to influence, you could say, diplomacy or the political systems of the different countries, right? Then you have, I'm thinking about more ideas. So, of course, it means that do not get into the direct fight. So, what do you use then? You use your human mind, that I've already written. But then it also, came into my mind that the tactics of psychological advantage. There are certain techniques in psychology, there are certain, tools and techniques that you actually apply over the human mind, be it over the leader of a country or over the, the masses of that particular country, which is your enemy, and you can influence them, you can persuade them, you can social engineer them. So that's what tactics of psychological advantage is, the one of the idea which is coming into my mind. And then of course, because I'm thinking about all this stuff, so I have another, idea coming, that yes, the conventional versus non-conventional methods of war, and what we were doing earlier in history, and now what we are trying to do. So we are trying to avoid wars, and we will be discussing about different thinkers and all who have sort of given both the perspective. They have tried to justify the war, and they have also said that as far as possible, try and avoid war. But if it comes to it, then you have to protect your sovereignty and the national interest, right? So this is what is there. Okay, just a moment, I'm just checking that the recording is happening fine, right? Okay, everything is fine, and let's continue. So this is what I will sort of, understand from the topic. Now when I start making my arguments, because this is what will constitute my body content, so I hope you're able to see. Yes, so when I start thinking about this topic, the idea is that yes, the topic is asking you directly about what. That means your core argument would be that you have to defeat your enemy without the use of brute force, without actually getting into the battlefield, or actually, using the conventional method of war, right? But then the historical perspective of war has always been like this, that most of the times it was fought on the battlefield. So when I start thinking of the arguments, I would just think from this perspective, that okay, what is the actual historical perspective of the war, in the sense that how wars did look like to set the context. Now, if you have been listening to my videos and learning from me, then you know that my initial 1-2 arguments are always to set the context, because I have always said that if you jump directly to the core argument, that okay, subdue your enemy without fighting, then you will be able to, not be able to cover a lot of words in your essay. And what would happen, that you will exhaust your ideas quite early in the essay. So the range of 1,000 to 1,200 words, which of course includes the introduction and the conclusion words, but still you will have very less number of words to write in your body content. So it's better to, set the context. जिसको हिंदी में हम कहते हैं ना, माहौल बनाओ, ठीक है? Set the context through some basic ideas, and then over the period of time, or I would say in the next pages of your essay writing, you are hitting the core argument directly. Whenever I say set the context, it should not take a lot of space. It should not have a higher weightage than the core argument, right? So always please be careful that whatever arguments you're using to set the context, maybe initial 1 or 2 pages that you're writing, initial maybe 200 to 250 words that you're writing, it should just be, limited to those number of words, and it should not extend into or spill over to the remaining pages, because we have to adhere to the core demand, core argument of the essay, which is about that you have to subdue your enemy without fighting. So let's start the discussion with the aspect of war. Okay, so we do know that why, okay, let's explore that why humans get involved in war. So of course there are 4 5 major reasons that have led to wars throughout history. One of course is resource competition and economic gain. We have seen this as a very very common, especially the wars, you could say during the times of imperialist powers and the the colonialist rule, you would say. There of course it was all about the economic gain and competition through, like, to acquire the colonies, right? How the India, there was a very particular period of time where French, Portuguese, Dutch, everybody, British, of course, everybody was trying to get control of certain areas of India, right? Because of this factor. So resource competition and economic gain has led to, is the major reason behind wars. Then of course you have also the reason of ideological conflict and religion. We have examples of crusades, right? Even ISIS wanting to establish the the caliphate. So in a way, the ideology and religion has also been one of the major reasons for the wars which has been happening throughout history. Then of course you have the cause of power transitions and security dilemmas, in the sense that when you start seeing that maybe one country was powerful for a very long period of time, but then a new country, a new nation state starts coming up, which is having, which appears to be getting powerful. And this sort of power transition between the old country to the newer country leads to conflict, leads to a lot of, you could say, animosity between the countries, of course, and even creates the situation of war, triggers the situation of war. So you have power transitions and even security dilemmas. Of course, security in the sense that because of the power transition, now earlier you were powerful, but now when the new country is coming up, you know that if you won't protect yourself, then that country will try to overtake you, or because I'm talking from the historical perspective. So there of course the rules and regulations of UN and all that was not happening over there. So in a way, yes, the World War I was a, you could say, directly related or a direct manifestation of this aspect of the reasons behind the wars. Then of course you also have a technology change. As soon as the countries started getting advanced military, right, they had advanced weapons, they had advanced technology, they could send planes intercontinental. So of course, and then we have intercontinental ballistic missiles, cruise missiles and whatnot, now drones and all that. So wherever there's a technology change, or you would say an advanced version of technology comes up, it actually gives a lot of power to the already nations which are warring. Maybe they're not the best of friends, but once they acquire a new technology, they could use that technology to wage wars. So these are the major, you could say, reasons. So you have new weapons, mobility or industrial capacity make the conquest feasible, right? Then you have even the aspects of ultra nationalism. I have written nationalism, but it's actually ultra nationalism. So ultra nationalism and even the leader psychology, the leader who's leading the country, what psychology they hold also can be the trigger or can be the important factor. So we have seen during the case of course, Nazi Germany, Hitler's mindset, Hitler's, idea of racial superiority. So those, of course, have led to the aspect of wars, right? And so because of this, the leader's psychology, or you could say the feelings of ultra nationalism, can spin the crisis out of the control, and it could actually trigger a full-fledged war. So these are the, basically, I would say, the reasons behind. This is my reasons for the war. This is my first argument to set the context. Now, of course, we also know that the impacts of war, the consequence of war are not desirable. They happen, it comes at a lot of cost of people, resources and all. So death, destruction, loss of human capital, great dent on resources, right? And that is why George Santayana has said, what? Only the dead have seen the end of war. Because when a war happens, now this quote again is very, like you can interpret in a lot of ways. Of course, one of the interpretation is that only dead knows that the war has ended because his life has ended. Otherwise, war is a continuous, keep on happening phenomena between the countries. So only the dead have seen the end of the war, because people who are left after the war are also not left in a good situation. Especially you could understand the situation of countries, especially the European countries post World War II. So kind of the death, loss, destruction they had endured, they had suffered genocide and mass, you could say, exterminations. All that had literally left European countries in a sort of a chaos, and deep depressive state, because such a destruction had happened. So only the dead have seen the end of war. For the people who are left behind, it's never the end of the war. Like, it doesn't feel like the war has ended. So we know that, okay, these things happen when a war happens, and your argument 1 and 2 you will actually use to just set the context. You will not write a lot of ideas. You have to be very brief, you have to be very concise when explaining these factors. You choose to skip something, that is okay, but at least out of these few ideas should be mentioned as part of your initial few paragraphs. So setting context through discussion on war, the whys and hows of it, right? Okay. Now we need to understand that, okay, before moving on to the third argument, or the third and fourth, which is the core argument, where we will learn about the tools, techniques, or we will discuss in the essay that what are the tools, techniques, or different tactics which can be used to defeat your enemy, but without the actual fighting. We need to also understand that the different, throughout history, there have been different viewpoints. So there always have been a set of thinkers, a school of thought, where people have justified war, and there's always been another school of thought where people, of course, despise war, because they know that, yes, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of loss which comes in the disguise of war, right? So we always have such kind of thinkers. It's good to understand these thinkers, because yes, here is where you extract content to be able to use in your ethics answers. If something comes on the aspect of war, the ethical aspect of war or the non-ethical aspect of war, you could bring such thinkers over there also. And if in the future you get another similar essay, why not, you could again use these thinkers. So let's understand from the thinker's perspective, the philosopher's perspective, that, like, if they're justifying war, then what is the reason? And if they despise war, then what is the reason? So thinkers who justify war, right, and who valorize, or who say that yes, war is something which is essential. So we have the first, you could say the oldest, the ancient, you could say one of the philosophers, the Greek historian Thucydides, right? So Thucydides has said that power plus fear are the motivators of state behavior, in the sense that if you want to exert your power, if you want to influence any state and even create fear in the minds of the people and the other nation states, you have to sort of, create an impression that you can go to war. You have the resources to create warlike situations or defeat your enemy. So his realism actually justifies preparedness for war. He doesn't say that, okay, go to war, but he says always be prepared for war. So his realistic idea was always about getting prepared for war, being prepared for war, because what he understood, and he was a Greek historian, so he, noticed certain, especially he saw, I think, the Peloponnesian War, right? I'm not going into much of details of it. If you're interested, I'm dropping these words. If your curiosity is good, you can actually search about, such words and know what was happening over there. But yes, the Greek historian actually took inspiration. He observed those the Peloponnesian War, and from there he understood that states should always be prepared for war. They should not, of course, directly jump to war, but it's no harm in actually being prepared for war. So power plus fear are the motivators of state behavior, and his idea was that, okay, be prepared for war. Then we have Machiavelli, right? Niccolo Machiavelli, very famous, the author of Prince. And for him, again, for the state's survival and maintaining of order in the state, in the country, in the nation state, you need to be again prepared for war. So they were, always justifying the thinkers, the school of thought which justified war. They did not exactly say that yes, for any instance or for anything you have to wage war, but they were like that if you want to protect yourself, you should be always prepared for war, because it goes for the same context that if you are unprepared and the person, the other, the other enemy nation state wages war, then you will surely lose. So you don't want to lose, you need to be very pragmatic. And that's why Machiavelli has said that for state survival and order, rulers should be prepared to use force, even cruelty when necessary. And that is why Machiavelli is, criticized a lot. But I think we need to understand all these thinkers in the context of the times that they were living in. Instead of criticizing, it's always better to know the perspective of the person who's making such ideas, who's giving out such ideas. So the perspective of the thinkers, what time and era they were living in. So Machiavelli, of course, had supported that to be able for the, the country and nation to survive, the ruler should be so strong. The king should be so strong that they should be ready to use force and even cruelty to maintain order, right? And that is what he has called it as. He has given the terminology realpolitik. Okay. Now you had Thomas Hobbes also. So Thomas Hobbes is also, trying to say that being prepared is part of preventing chaos. So one should be always. So in a way, you could understand that all of these thinkers are saying the same thing but using different words. Eventually they are saying that, okay, you need to be prepared for war. You can't just live in a happy state and assume that nobody's going to go to war, or nobody's going to, like, go against you. Nobody's your enemy, everybody's your friend. Nothing like that can actually happens in the real, nature. And in a way, you need to be always prepared. So Thomas Hobbes also said that preparedness is part of preventing chaos. And in a way, they were saying, they also had this one viewpoint, which is again common, an opinion, which they say that sometimes being prepared creates a credible deterrence. So if you're prepared for war, you can actually prevent war, because in a way the enemy nation state, or the person, or the country in front of you as an enemy who is ready to wage war against you, might feel the fear that, okay, the country is also prepared. So in a way, credible deterrence also can be happen, or it can also happen in the sense of that when you're prepared for war. So all these schools of thoughts were just not about violence, but they were very practical in their approach. Then we have another military strategist, okay, and he's the, you could say, more contemporary military strategist, and you could say thinker, and he has given the idea, and the person is Karl von Clausewitz. So Clausewitz has talked about that war is continuation of policy by other means. So now this person, Clausewitz, because of course he's a more contemporary, he has seen those wars, he's observed the various world wars and what was happening. His idea is that for nation states, for leaders, war is actually an direct or indirect method of continuation of the policy. So whatever the policy the leader, the government, the authorities are holding, the same policy is the same, continuation of policy is actually through the war. So in a way, for a real strong leader, or for for their ideology to persist, war is just another policy method for them. They don't differentiate between war and the other policy methods. So war is rational, political, and it's a tool to achieve state objectives. So Clausewitz have been, you would say that all of these were justifying war from a very different perspective, but Karl von Clausewitz had talked about that states use this as objective to actually maintain control, maintain order, and war is just another tool to achieve their state's objectives, right? And this is just continuation of the policy by other means. Okay, so this is one of the most contemporary, you could say, thinker who has tried to give the viewpoint on how actually wars can be justified. Then we have thinkers who reject war. Now this column has names and people who reject the concept of war, or maybe they are very skeptical about the concept of war. So of course we have Sun Tzu, because this quote is of Sun Tzu, and Sun Tzu was, what? He was the Chinese strategist, right? And he has emphasized that instead of directly waging war, you could utilize what? You could use intelligence, you could use deception, you could use flexibility and winning through psychological advantage. If you remember, in the theme I mentioned that this also means that you have to use other tools and techniques, which of course will employ human ingenuity, human intelligence. It will employ using psychology to your benefit. So he also has said that instead of directly waging war and getting on the battlefield, please use deception, use intelligence, use psychological advantage, so that you can subdue your enemy, you can defeat your enemy. Similarly, you have Cotelier. Cotelier's idea is also very pragmatic, I would say. It's a mix of that. It's not just about violence and doing the war, but it's about that, okay, you should be able to employ a lot of tactics. So you do know that, okay, the Sam, Dan, Dandabhed, right? So Sam, Dan, Dandabhed, and this concept is very, very famous. So he says that use diplomacy, use, bribe, use force, punishment, and you can also use the secret, which is, in the recent times, we know the honey trapping, blackmailing. So sometimes if there's already a secret available for that person, you utilize, you sort of use that secret against that person, and because of, he wants to save his name and respect in the society, he would try to maybe, give in to your demands. So this Sam Dan Danbhed is, a very, very, you could say, pragmatic mix of tools and techniques which one can use to exert influence over the other party, be it a person or be it a country, right? Then you have, so of course, Cotterley has preferred what? He has preferred that you should use persuasion, because, diplomacy, you're talking, you're trying to bribe, you're trying to convince, right? And then, of course, creating alliances and intelligence is also what they have tried to talk about. Then Emile Durkheim has talked about economic interdependence. Now, of course, the Durkheim and the Joseph Nye, right? So both these are very contemporary thinkers again, and their idea is not directly on the war, but they have focused on the other mechanisms through which war can be avoided. So in a way, they have not given a direct theory on war, but their idea is that if you do certain other things, you can definitely avoid war. So what are the other things? The other things is that if you have economic interdependency between states, so yes, if you have trade connections, you have trade relations, you have, you have, you could say, shared value system, you have shared norms, then war feels less attractive. And this has been, a major reason behind, you could say, that we still haven't had any major war after the World War II, because countries, became economically interdependent. They started making economic trade blocks, right? So countries belonging to same region going against each other, waging a war against each other is, has the probability of happenings like this has literally decreased, because nobody wants to incur a loss by waging a war, right? So you have shared norms and shared value system also. Joseph Nye has talked about the hard power, the soft power concept, right? So soft power is the, again, the indirect method of persuasion, of influence, where you maybe you use, different tactics to actually social engineer people and convert them from enemies to maybe, if not your friends, to a position of neutrality. So yes, we do know that cultural values, and if you're, propagating your cultural values, you're propagating your religion, so all those, can be used to exert influence and avoid a direct war. So these two actually are the recent thinkers who have not given a direct, you could say, idea on war, but they have just tried to say that there are other methods which are available which can help you avoid wars. And it's very necessary that we should be having, because that was, the aspect of thinkers. Now this data is actually continuing from the aspect of the impact of war. So I just wanted to give you a figure. Now we need to understand that there could be, different figures and different facts for this, because of course nobody was counting that how many, exact casualties, civilian and non-civilian, happened during the world wars, or during each of the world war. So but yes, an estimate has been drawn, because every country tried to estimate its loss, and we have realized that World War I had 15 to 22 million people dead, and World War II had 50 to 85 million people dead. And why the huge, increase in numbers? Of course, the widespread nature of the war, plus also they have counted the people dying under mass exterminations, genocides, mass killings and all, right? So there, even the civilian death has been counted, and you get these figures. So you could understand such a, huge loss, and impact of war is never less or, digestible. It's always something which impacts a lot. So Mahatma Gandhi has said that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, right? So the animosities or the wars is not going to benefit anybody, right? So this quote you can use to highlight that. But then you have the understanding that it's imperative to avoid war. And for this is the discussion which will lead us to the actual discussion, the core argument, that yes, if you want to fight your enemy, but use other tools and techniques to subdue the enemy without fighting. So it is imperative to avoid war and use other techniques. So why it is imperative? You need to, just understand from 2-3 different reasonings. So you have, of course, the moral and ethical reasoning behind it, right? Nothing new. You already know the points, you know the idea that, okay, what is the aspect of, morality behind not waging the war, or being non-violent, and like, of course, not causing the situations which lead to loss of human lives, which leads to lack of human dignity. So all of this is, so the moral ethical reasoning talks about what? it talks about minimizing violence. It tries to talk about that ensure human life and dignity. Okay. Right, yes. So ensuring human life and dignity. Then, of course, it is also about being ethically prudent. You're pragmatic, you're practical, and it's from the ethical perspective that war is not going to benefit any of the sides, right? So you have this. And then, of course, non-violence, you've got the religious perspective. You have the consequentialist sensibility, in the sense that if you want to go for the least harm principle, then of course you have to avoid war, because you do know that in war there is even collateral damage. It's not that the people, only the soldiers are getting killed. The population at the borders and all that, and the people living at the borders, they also, they are, you could say, killed, and that's said as a collateral damage, but it's not something which is desirable, right? So yes, you have this least harm principle. If you want to really go for least harm principles, you have to avoid the wars. Then you have the deontological perspective also. Then there's political philosophical reasoning, that usually the countries, when they go to war, the subsequent governments might, or the government which actually decided to go to war, might lose credibility, because people then stop believing that this particular leader can, because yes, in the initial they might say, okay, go to war, go to war, go to war, but then after that comes the death, destruction, the loss of economic power, the loss of resources, and then the population realizes that war was not the solution. So actually governments, when they wage wars, they really lose credibility in the eyes of the population, the eyes of the masses and the citizens. And for that reason also, you have that the war should be avoided. So lasting peace can be achieved by avoiding wars, right? And sometimes brutally imposed peace is brittle, but it is prone to cracks. So post your war, post conflict, even if your peace is imposed, it can be brittle. So it looks like everything is peaceful, but sometimes that has cracks in it. So post war, even the peace with should look like peace, is actually not peace. It just might create more conflicts. And of course we do know that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So conflicts create more enemies. You will not subdue your enemy if you're directly fighting. You might create one more enemy, which usually happens, right? So you have this political philosophical reasoning also. Pragmatism also says that you should avoid war, victory without costs of battle, right? So victory without cost of, and most efficient use of force. So the pragmatism says that victory should be without waging the battle directly. And it does what? It conserves resources. It ensures political legitimacy. It ensures that the institutional capacity is maintained. Because yes, just like I told you, that when a country goes to war, there's a lot of threat to credibility of its government and even to its institutions. They might get a situation of civil war. Sometimes external disturbance can create an internal disturbance like situation. So the country has to be very pragmatic, be very prudent, and avoid war at all costs. So it is imperative to avoid war, and these are the reasonings behind it, right? Of course, you know that why it's important. I've just given you a few words so that you could properly, if you're using this argument, you can properly justify that, okay, why we need to avoid wars, by giving out different reasonings, right? Then of course, if you are, because you cannot turn your enemy into friend, so how to defeat your enemy? Use different tools and techniques. So what are the different tools and techniques? And that is why this justifies your phrase of the topic, art of war. War in itself is not an aspect of creativity or art, but then the art of war says that you don't exactly go to war, you use different tools and techniques to fight your enemy. And it leads to what? So what are the tools and techniques? Let's understand. Of course, you have negotiation and mediation. And yes, we have the world famous example of Donald Trump brokering peace between so many countries, right? So yes, negotiation and mediation is something which is very, very, useful technique to avoid wars. And in a way, of course, you're not defeating your enemy, but yes, at least you're also not defeated. So when you're negotiating, when you're mediating, maybe a third party is negotiating, a deal, a peace deal. In a way, you're not exactly winning, but you're also not losing out. You're not losing out on people. You're not losing out on resources, and not creating some instability in the country. So that's something to be actually looked forward to. That should be applied, right? So collective security plus alliances, you have NATO, for example, of that. So in a way, even that, okay, even we have the recent example, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan telling each other that any act of aggression against one country will be considered as act of aggression against the other. So such kind of strong alliances can maybe deter war, direct war. Then you have very credible deterrence through military power, through nuclear power, right? And other credible threats. Sometimes, certain agencies, some certain military powers, they are so strong that actually the countries fear that it's actually better to avoid wars with such countries, where such kind of, you could say, credible deterrence through nuclear power, through military power is there. Then you have even economic statecraft. You can use other techniques to defeat your enemy without actually waging a war. We have sanctions, we have trade barriers, we have tariffs, right? All that has been done. You have, even the you could say isolating the country, which has been done to Russia many times, which is being done to Iran, North Korea, right? So you have such countries, very too many examples. Trade embargoes, that we will not trade with them. If we will not trade with them, then of course, they will face a lot of economic issues, and their country might be in a deep trouble of not having the economic resources. Then these are some like very ethical you could say techniques. Then we have some different techniques, which is where psychology, intelligence, real comes into play. So you have the other techniques are what? Espionage, right? Using intelligence, infiltration. And in espionage, of course, I'm not saying, I'm not justifying, but yes, honey trapping has been used as a tool to sometimes subdue your enemy, right? It could be an individual, it could be even what? It could be even a country, where countries, major leaders, or any person, any important person holding a important position is sometimes honey trapped to literally arm twist him to sort of get ready to accept certain conditions. Then you have track to diplomacy. Yes, the back channel diplomacy, we have all heard of this term. We know as the GS student that what is back channel, what is track to diplomacy. Yes, again, it's a very effective tactic. Then you have, of course, soft power and cultural exchange. Through that also, sometimes we have done this a lot of times with our neighborhood country Pakistan, right? Then you have narrative shaping. Now this is something you must have seen during the Operation Sindoor incident, that the Pakistan social media was filled with fake news, and even our social media actually also, and even our news channels for that matter. So let's not blame Pakistan in that. We were also equally guilty of it. But then yes, in a way you could understand that how social media narratives and how social engineering was being done to convince the residents or the citizens of each of the country that that particular country had won the war, or won the you could say against the enemy. So Pakistan's social media was actively portraying that yes, they had won it, and India's social media was also trying to project that they had not suffered even a single loss, and all losses were on the side of Pakistan. So in a way, yes, everybody was busy developing a narrative, spreading the disinformation, right? Then you also have cyber attacks, a very greater tool in today's time. Yes, I'm saying it as a tool. It should not be done, but yes, you have examples of cyber attacks through ransomware and this and that, and where the major critical infrastructures or have been crippled. There have been blackouts. It has happened a lot of times. The Estonian example is very common. So you have the cyber attacks crippling the economic system. Even the movie, it's a recent movie, I think on Netflix or something, where Leave the World Behind. So even in the Leave the World Behind movie, it has been shown that how unknown, like it was still not known that which country had actually, used the cyber attack, like the technique of cyber attack to attack USA. I think it was USA based only. And then, but everything was like planes were crashing because navigation had failed, and all autonomous robots and vehicles and all that were getting stranded. They were crashing into each other. The smartphones were not working, and the world has literally within few hours gone back to the times where we had no technology. So it's a nice movie to watch. It's a fictional movie, of course, but yes, you could take that inspiration for your introduction in your essays also. So Leave the World Behind, a very nice movie to show that if we have a full-fledged cyber attack, how the disinformation, how the narrative shaping, and how our dependency on the technology around us, which is of course run through internet, and if a cyber attack happens, then we are crippled for sure. So all that was shown in that movie, and these are all the tools and techniques which are utilized, which should be utilized, which is being, you could say, justified by Sun Tzu, that you should not get onto a direct battlefield or direct battle with your enemy, but maybe use some other techniques. And this is the art of war. So use these techniques to actually subdue your enemy, because yes, in international relations, you will have enemies. You can't be friends with everyone. And yes, you need to be very, very careful. So then I'll give you those examples of deception. Here in the blue, I have just tried to, given you the clarity that the argument 1 and 2 will be just used to set the context, and your major arguments are argument 3 and 4, through which you will develop a lot of ideas and you will write a lot of paragraphs, right? So this will constitute your major weightage of the body content of your essay. Okay, argument 3 and 4. Now let's have few examples of deception, so that the espionage or the intelligence and human ingenuity being as an example. So what is the first example? So there is one very famous, you could say, Operation Mincemeat. Operation Mincemeat was the one of the operation where the Allied, actually sort of tried to deceive the German planners. They planted false documents, because you can't remove the documents. Then it will create what? A further doubt in the mind. So you tend to replace the document. That if somebody's trying to spy, if somebody's trying to get hold of something, they do find something, because not finding something will create a doubt. And then they will try it through other methods. So you plant false documents, right? So instead of actually the real targets, you had the false, invasion targets, and that is how they were able to defeat the Germans. So in a way, nice example of deception. Okay, then you have the spies and the spy networks. So I'm not going to talk about here James Bond. Okay, if you want, you can bring in, but I'm just trying to tell you that there was actually a very female, very famous female spy called as Mata Hari in World War One, and she's the real, like the real example of femme fatale, and where she she was actually a performer, but then she was recruited to be a spy later on. And because of that, she was, a female performer. She used to go into parties and extract, information and all that. So I think there's some movies also based out of her. If you're interested, you can watch it in your free time. But Mata Hari again was a very, very famous, world famous spy. And she was a performer, but yes, disguised, like she was also a spy. And she used to extract a lot of information, because she used to visit parties, and there, the military heads and the commanders would come. And when people are, drinking and boozing, of course, it becomes very free to extract information out of it. So she really tried to, project herself as a very sweet and innocent lady, but then she was actually a spy. So a very nice example of deception, right? Then you have, of course, we have a lot of examples over social media, how disinformation, how social engineering, how through echo chambers and all, a lot of, fake narratives are implanted, a lot of which is actually, in a way to influence the masses. So you tend to influence the masses might, create a situation of civil war or internal disturbance and destabilize the country. We are seeing it, though of course there's no direct proof, but in a way you could see that this has been happening last year also in Bangladesh, and even in this year, in the country of Nepal. So in a way, some external forces are responsible to aid such kind of civil disturbances. Now, it's very difficult to actually say that whatever was happening for good or bad, because you do understand that instability or chaotic situations will not be useful for anybody. And yes, if they are able to achieve democracy after toppling the government, after doing such kind of, you could say revolt and protest, it's good. If they are not, then you do understand that how country, like, literally goes for a toss, the entire systems. So, and during such revolutions and protests, nobody is spared. Nobody is innocent. Nobody is, guilty. And again, there's a lot of collateral damage. So instability and chaotic, type of situation in the country is very, very, I would say, you need to be really afraid of such things. So some people wish that, okay, when India will have such kind of, no, don't wish, please. Don't believe in such kind of narratives and all, that India should also have a revolution. Okay, yes, we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of scams. We have a lot of corruption. We have a lot of corrupt people. We have corrupt politicians. We have corrupt bureaucrats. We have corruption everywhere in every field. But please don't wish your country to be, destable, to have a revolution or protest, which is because, trust me on this, only 2 days back during one of my sessions of the alchemy, I was discussing in the theme of revolutions, and there we have realized that even in the course of history, you would see that revolutions, any revolution's immediate result was never democracy. It was always either, democracy being the pretext, but again, the control was taken over by a person, be it Lenin, Stalin, or, even in French revolutions, you have Maximilian Robespierre. So all these people, of course, they wanted to topple the monarch, they wanted to topple the king and the queen. But yes, they wanted to, of course, achieve a democratic state for and the equal rights for the citizens and all. But eventually they also turned dictator, they also turned authoritarian, they also turned, evil. So in a way, we have seen that revolutions and protests, especially the violent types, really are not useful in the long run. So please don't wish something like that for our country. And I know that you all are sensible, you are, preparing for civil services. So of course, there is a lot of sensibility and, better sense of judgment with all of you. But at least if you have friends and people around you who tend to use, such ideas, and they want to, even casually mention, please make them understand that it is something it should not be desired. It's not something to be taken as in a light way, right? So we don't let other people, create conflicts in your own country. So this is what, the tools and techniques are there, right? Now, what is your counter argument? The counter argument is very simple, that sometimes you have to, of course, wage wars. You have to, confront your enemy directly, because war at times become necessary, and there is limitations of the tools and techniques. There's limitation to the use of intelligence, there's limitation to the use of espionage, there's limitation to the use of diplomacy tactics, there's limitation to use of soft power, cultural exchange, and back channel diplomacy, right? We have failed so many times within the dealings with Pakistan. So in a way, sometimes war becomes necessary. So in the same context, what George Washington has said, that you need to be prepared for war, which is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. So he also has said, if you remember, we discussed the various thinkers, Hobbes, right? And you had even Thucydides who talked about. So being prepared for war is something which is very, very important. And sometimes if you want to really ensure peace, be prepared for war, because that creates a credible deterrence. But sometimes war, of course, becomes necessary, and you have to be always prepared for that kind of situation. Now, so this completes our discussion, the major, arguments in the body content. What could be the introductions and conclusions that you can write for such kind of essay? So yes, the theme is war, but in a way you could, use the different ways of, there are two ways basically. One is the personality based, okay, and where you're taking up maybe an example of a person, of a famous personality, or any individual. And then the other way is you use the contemporary events. So for this topic, I have tried to use the example of Alan Turing. You must have heard of his name, and there's also a very famous movie based out of his life story, The Imitation Game. So Alan Turing was a British mathematician, and he worked to break the encryption of Nazis' Enigma machine. So Enigma machine was one such machine which was encrypting the communication of the Nazi Germany officials among themselves. So he actually broke the encryption using, the same kind of principles which the software people do right now. So he applied the same principles attackers use today to exploit software and break the code. And it is said that, of course, it's not proven, but it is said that because of this, the ability to break the encoded messages between the Nazi Germany, the Britishers had an advantage in the war, and it led to the decrease of the World War II by an estimated 2 to 4 years. So it did not stop the war, but of course, because if you're able to decrypt that, okay, what's the communication happening between your enemy, of course you will have a lot of military advantage. So that advantage literally, you could say, accelerated the defeat of the Nazi Germany. So this is said to be that one of the, it is one of the tipping points in the history of in the sequence of the events of the World War II. And it literally led that the war's end gotten accelerated by a gap of 2 to 4 years. Otherwise, it would have extended to 2 to 4 years more. But because of the decrypting of the communication, we were able to decode and understand that, okay, what's their plan, what's, where they are going to target and all that. And we were failing their all plans. So this is something that was really, really useful. So you have to subdue your enemy without fighting. And Alan Turing's example is a great example for this kind of topic, right? Then you have, of course, if you're not aware with the Alan Turing's example, you can pick up the contemporary events, because it is being said that, okay, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. So yes, we have the ransomware, we have the cyber attacks, where you can of course subdue. And if you remember, I gave you the example of the movie Leave the World Behind. So if you know the story, you can develop the story of that movie, like what exactly happened, what was shown in the movie as a fictional story, and that you can also use as your introduction, right? So be innovative and creative, use a lot of different ideas. Don't just stick to writing something of personality only, or maybe this only. Use different ideas, use movie references also, critically acclaimed movie references. Use, you could say, something, a movie reference which is very, very you could say fictional in nature, but maybe trying to project or give you the real picture that what could happen, right? So dystopian kind of future and dystopian works. So you have this sort of two introductions. Now for the conclusion, so what will you write in the conclusion of this topic? So you need to connect it to the contemporary relevance. True. So the contemporary chaotic world, countries need to combine pragmatism with ethics. So you need to be realistic. You need to be prepared for war, but you also need to be combining that preparedness of war with ethics, and do not wage war unless until it's absolutely necessary. So yes, invest in layered ethical intelligence. What steps you can take? Actually, you need to invest in layered ethical intelligence, because if you have a strong espionage system, espionage network, if you have a strong spy networks, if you have a strong intelligence, techniques to gather intelligence and information, it's really going to create a lot of advantage for you. Then of course, make deterrence credible. That means military, nuclear deterrence, right? It has to be there. Then you integrate diplomacy and economic statecraft. So integrate diplomacy, integrate trade and all that, cultural exchange, soft power, use all of that thing to create a relation where the enemies are not exactly your friends, but maybe they turn into neutral situation, they turn into neutral people, right? So what are the 3 Ds that you can follow to actually avoid wars? Detect, deter, and de-escalate. So detect, that means of course gather information. You should be able to detect that, okay, what your enemy country, what your enemy is doing. You should be able to deter them through, of course, credible deterrence. Create a situation where the enemy is afraid to wage war against you, because they know that you are equally strong or maybe better than them, right? So that's what deterrence means. And then of course, de-escalate, that if the situation gets very severe, very tense, use other tools and techniques to de-escalate the situation. Do not increase the severity of the situation. The 3 Ds is something that a strong leader, a leader of the country, should be able to use, or government should use, to actually avoid wars, and we need to be prepared for war. So then what's the ending, you could say, takeaway, ending, concluding line that you could write, right? Avoid war and violence, but real politics says not at the cost of sovereignty and self-rule. So yes, you need to be, again, going by the same thinkers ideas, that you should be prepared and use it as credible deterrence, but also do not be so ill prepared, or do not be unprepared, that the person can come, and or the enemy country can wage war against you, and your sovereignty and all that is costed. You lose sovereignty. So just like India is known not to attack first, right? We are known as a peaceful civilization, as a peaceful country. We have never attacked any country first. But in a way, if the time comes and if the situation rises, then we should be able to do something like Operation Sindoor or the surgical strikes over the years that we have been doing. So in a way, the enemy should be afraid of us. It should not feel that India is a peace-loving country and anything can be done against us. We need to have such strong systems in place. And if it becomes necessary, if it comes to the point of war, we should be ready to wage war. So in that way, you should end your essay on a pragmatic note. Don't be overly ethical, and bring in a spiritual perspective that no, war is it's a no, it's a violent thing and people die. Yes, but you cannot submit to the enemy just because you're peace loving, right? That's not how the real world works. So in a way, do not justify war, but of course you can end in such a pragmatic way for this kind of essay. Very interesting topic actually, and I hope that whatever we discussed today, you'll be able to use it in your ethics answers. You'll be able to use in different kind of essays also, right? Especially the thinkers and all that, their ideas could be used in a lot of good way. Now the second topic, that is the section B topic, the topic number 6, right? And this is a topic again which I would say is not difficult, but yes, it's easy to understand. It's easy to connect it to a theme, but you might face difficulty in framing the arguments. That's true, that will happen. So please practice such kind of topics, that how will you frame the arguments, what ideas you'll be writing, what you're able to understand. And sometimes I feel that maybe there could be a certain section of students who might not be able to interpret the topic in a correct manner. So for such kind of topics, correct interpretation is very, very important. If you have a doubt, please do not attempt such kind of topics in the exam, because maybe you have interpreted in a very different way. And if there's a sense of doubt, I'm not saying that you should keep on doubting, but if there's even a slight doubt that maybe I'm not so sure what this topic means, do not attempt. And I think this year many of the, I mean, the students writing in mains exam, they have not opted for this topic. So yes, it's good to have this kind of, understanding and touch towards reality. Okay, what are the keywords? Of course, ears, right? You have ears teach much, these are the phrases. And days never know. So in a way, what could be the theme or the category which, under which I can place this topic? Of course, my understanding is that this one of the theme is wisdom. Why? Because it's trying to say that the years teach much which the days never know. So in a way, teaching, of course, comes with, comes with the aspect of synonyms of knowledge, wisdom, learning, right? So wisdom for me is one of the themes. Then long-term perspective, because it's talking about that years gonna teach you. So years teach much. That means the years gonna teach you a lot, and that is why you need a long-term perspective on certain things. You need a deep understanding, because during one of the single day, you might have a shallow understanding of things. So you need a deep understanding. And then, of course, one of the hashtags could be time is strong, in the way that with time you develop wisdom, with time you gain a lot of experiences, and that turns into wisdom, right? So time is strong is also one of the theme. Then when I'm thinking about the topic, what ideas come into my mind? So these are the ideas that I have jotted down, that okay, what do I understand, what is my interpretation, what different ideas can I connect from this to this topic? And there are no examples over here, right? So yes, it says that, okay, strength of accumulation. So compounding effect, because yes, the years teach much which the days never know. So maybe if you have deposited money, you won't get one day's interest, maybe you get a monthly interest or quarterly interest or whatever, right? But then over the years, that money gets compounded, because the interest also gets added. And then you have the beauty of compounding effect, that you invested, a small amount, but over the years that amount has turned into a huge amount because of the act of, or the impact of accumulation or the compounding effect. So this is what came into my mind, that the days never know, but the years teach much. So maybe the day is that kind of the single day where I invested maybe a small amount of money, and over the years it has taught me that compounding effect has happened, and I could gain a lot of because of the years, right? Then connect the dots only looking backward. So in a way, this topic also says that the days don't know, like the day in itself is never aware what's happening, what's going to, what's the benefit in the near future or so. So in a way, you can only understand stuff when you're connecting the dots looking backwards. So looking at the future, or maybe at this present moment, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but when you look backwards, then you can connect a lot of events and dots which has happened in your life, that okay, this led to this led to that led to that, and then that's why I'm here. So all that, connecting the dots only looking backward, in a way that you can make sense of your life only when you're looking backward. At this point of time, the doubts and the fears will be there, the insecurities will be present. But when you look backwards, then you're able to associate a lot of things, that okay, this all has come together to make me a successful person today, right? And this make me is like, you can imagine yourself also, it's not just me. Okay, so the years teach much which the days never know. And the day doesn't know that when you're going to gain success. So over the period of time, you can only connect the dots looking backward. And this is also a very, very famous quote, a very famous takeaway from one of the speeches of Steve Jobs, right? So you can actually search his speech if you want to develop content. In a way, with these discussions, I'm giving you two major benefits: how to frame arguments, how to decode a topic so that you have variety of arguments and ideas to write about, and not just, okay, what is the years which is teaching much, what are the days which don't know, not that kind of arguments, a different kind of argument. And then of course, I'm also dropping in ideas, dropping in unconventional examples, dropping in thinkers, dropping in a lot of names and examples which can be elaborated, which you can learn and use it in your essays. So I'm also trying to go for content enrichment and value addition through the discussion of the topics. Okay. So please, whatever, if I say that if you have to search, you can search just like the movie reference I gave in the last topic. And here you have the Steve Jobs speech, connecting the dots. Okay, so connecting the dots, only looking backward. This topic also talks about that patience and perseverance, right? Because the years teach much. So years, of course, take time. So the patience word can also be understood from this topic. Then you have, of course, gathering wisdom takes time. Yes, the topic is talking about that. And then a single day might be seen as mundane, okay, might be seen as boring. A single days of work might seem boring, day in, day out, same routine. But over the period of time, whatever effort you put in that one single day over the period of time gets accumulated together and gives you a result, right? So a single day might seem mundane, but yield results in years. So these are the ideas I understood from the topic. Now I wanted to give you this one different thing which I have not done earlier, especially for this topic, that you should be able to understand what's the meaning of the topic, right? Because I do understand that there will be certain students, for them this topic might be very confusing, that what does it actually mean. So let's understand the meaning of the topic. I have jotted it down in in form of some sentences. Let's just read through it, understand that, okay, what's the meaning of the topic. The years teach much which the days never know. So wisdom comes with passage of time, not from single moments, right? So years teach much, wisdom comes with passage of time. Daily experiences may seem ordinary, but over years they add up to deeper understanding, right? Then you have time gives perspective, helping us see patterns, consequences, and meanings that we miss in the rush of everyday life. In essence, age and experience reveal truths that short-term thinking cannot. So this is what your topic is trying to expect, that okay, this what topic means exactly. Now let's move on to the actual arguments. So here, actually, because you do understand that not a very wide variety, not a wide variety or multi-dimensional ideas or arguments could be framed, but there is, this topic is giving you possibility to frame 2-3 major ideas, and that what I have discussed over here. So let's see what's the first argument, because then again, at the cost of repeating myself, you do know that my initial first or the second argument, like the first two arguments, or sometimes even just the one first argument, is used to just set the context for the upcoming discussion. So let's see for this topic, what's that, argument for me. So I have tried to talk about the human life, because from the topic, the way I have read the topic, the years teach much. So the years teaching much to whom? To an individual, to a human, right? And of course, this years and days are part of the human life, right? So there lies my first argument, which says that the human life means a long human life is a laboratory for the soul's realization of its immortality. And this is the Bhagavad Gita saying that a long human life is a laboratory for the soul's realization of its immortality. That means what? That human life is accumulation of years lived, suffered, endured, and it provides lessons and wisdoms. So in a way, you're just supposed to elaborate a human life. You can bring in example of Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, especially any person who has lived a long period of life and has done a lot of mistakes and has, learned a lot of things through his experience of the happenings around him. So be it Nelson Mandela, be it Gandhi, very appropriate examples. You can use them to justify this argument. The first argument is about the human life, and that human life is, of course, sort of accumulation of experiences, and it provides lessons. Then my second argument is that time and experience as teachers. So yes, in a way, there's always a debate that do you need to just read theories to gain wisdom? Maybe just by reading books you can gain wisdom. Yes, that's also one of the way. Or you need to actually experience life to gain wisdom. So in a way, both the things are said to actually aid a person to gain knowledge and wisdom. That means, yes, theoretical knowledge, theoretical wisdom does play a role, but you also need to experience life. That is why maturing through age, having a lot of experiences also gives you wisdom. So time and experience as teachers, right? So thinker Aristotle has talked about. Now here I'm going to give you the perspective of thinker, that what they have talked about. So Aristotle actually has given you two concepts. One is this, Sophia, and Sophia is of course theoretical wisdom, right? So you have theoretical wisdom, and then you have phronesis, right? So phronesis talks about practical wisdom, and Practical wisdom, which is the phronosis, comes only through living the years and the experience that comes with it. So this comes through years lived, and it doesn't come in a day. So practical wisdom comes through only experience, and it cannot happen in one day. Theoretical wisdom, maybe you read a book and you can gain that theoretical wisdom. So Aristotle has talked about that there are two types of, like, there are two ways of gaining wisdom. The first way is, of course, theoretical, by reading theory, and the second way is the practical, which you actually live through the experiences and gain that wisdom. Then we have another thinker, Kierkegaard, and he has talked about what? He says that life is lived forward but understood backwards. In the same way, you could say maybe this could be the inspiration for Steve Jobs, connecting the dots and, in the backwards way. So life is lived forwards but understood backwards. So you can always gain wisdom by reflecting on the years which have went by, which, you have lived your life. So when you reflect on that, then only you can understand. So life needs to be lived in a forward way. You can't go back to living your life in the past. But then by reflection, by understanding, you do understand, okay, what has happened in the past. And through that learning, through that wisdom, you can live a better life in the future, right? So you have time and experience as teachers. I've given you examples, Nelson Mandela, and then all the revolutions and protests which yield results in decades. So just like I mentioned to you that most of the revolutions which have happened, they have not given democracy, or they have not given stability and order in the country in just 1 year or so. Sometimes it has taken a lot of time, even you could say decades and decades of time, to gain democracy. Like it said that I think it was 80 to 90 years for the French society to gain democracy from till the time of, counting from the time of the French Revolution. So some things take really, a long time, and time and experience as teachers is what is the second argument. Then you have, what is the human development perspective in this? That the years teach much which the days never know. And of course, we are trying to justify the topic. We are trying to say that the years are important, right? So the human development perspective also say that means the psychologists, the various psychologists have also talked about that certain things happens with maturation. Certain things, like certain knowledge, certain development of the mindset, maturity will happen only with age, right? You can't expect a child to know everything. So the human development theory, where you have 2 3 psychologists. So one is a name of Jean Piaget. Okay, I've just, his first name is Jean, like Jean. Now somebody pronounce it as John, somebody says Jean, whatever your pronunciation is. Okay, his actual name is Jean Piaget. Okay, and this is like T is silent. So Piaget has talked about what? He has talked about developmental psychology. Okay, developmental psychology says what? That years are required for cognitive structures to mature. So he says that, of course, human development, would talk about that it takes a child to grow. So that kind of experience will happen. So years are required for the cognitive structures to mature, and then, sorry, then only you can have the facts turning into facts, or the knowledge turning into the wisdom. So even if you give a lot of facts to a child, it will take him time to understand and start applying those facts and gain wisdom out of it. So we need years to be lived to be able to understand or gain maturity. Similarly, we have another human development psychologist by name of Erik Erikson, and he also has emphasized that each stage of human life is very important because each stage teaches a different kind of lessons. So teaches lessons inaccessible earlier. So every stage of human life or human maturation, like from a toddler, from a baby to a full grown adult, you have different stages, and different stages have different set of teachings attached with it. So I'm so sorry. So you have each stage of life teaches lessons, and which is inaccessible earlier, like you cannot skip some stage. So every stage comes with its own set of learnings, and then you keep on adding to your learnings and understanding, and then you convert into a full grown mature adult. So you have different roles to play, you have different experiences. Like here, crisis is not the exact crisis, but it's just kind of different experience, like the schooling years, a child has to go to school, then he interacts with the outside world, and then maybe when you're growing up, you have different kind of interactions, a lot of studies to be done. So all that creates a different kind of situations and opportunities for the person, for the child to learn. And that is where it is important, that you can't just You have to go through each stage of life. So years really add up to the knowledge and to the experience, and years of adulthood reveal wisdom acquired through rules and crisis, right? This crisis here, the opportunities. Then here we come to the aspect of a sort of a counter argument, I would say, countering the topic, that can we ignore the importance of days or day or single day? So you have a lot of debate between what? You have debate between immediacy, immediate, that the day concept, and the long-term wisdom. So the wisdom acquired through the years, is that important, or is a single day important? Because the years are made up of that single day. So single days are also important, and that's what the debate is. Then you have surface versus depth. So the surface knowledge versus the in-depth knowledge. So of course you first try and understand something in a superficial way from the surface knowledge, and then you start creating the in-depth knowledge of it, right? So surface versus in-depth knowledge. Of course, experiences versus theory, the same thing. Theoretical wisdom, Sophia versus phronosis, right? So experience versus theory, these are the debates which are, which has been happening. But can one substitute another? The real argument here is that, can one substitute another? Is only one thing important and the other thing is not important? Is day only important, or is year only important? No, we can't say that. So in a way, of course, we know that years are going to teach us a lot of things, maturity, through experiences and all, but days also matter. How does it matter? Because Epicurus says that each day contains potential for joy. Don't wait for years. So in a way, most of the thinkers have said that yes, the human life is a long life. It's to be lived and a lot of experiences, but you cannot just keep on waiting for things to happen. You have to live each day like a single day, like a single opportunity. So in a way, Epicurus and Epicureans, the school of thought, they also talk about that each day contains potential for joy. Stoics, Marcus, Aurelius, or Stoicism, the Stoics also talked about that do not act as if you have 10,000 years to throw away. Death stands at your elbow while you live it, while it is in your power. Be good. So live for today, because yes, there could be a possibility that you're living a long life. You have a lot of lot of years to live. But then we can't assume that you're going to have a good long life. Maybe death can come sooner, and that is why live for today, live each moment, right? So this is what that is how the days matter. A single day also matters, and in a way, we have seen that single day can drastically change. So single days in the history have been able to change the human civilization, have been proven as turning points. You had 9/11 incident, you have the fall of the Bastille during the French Revolution, you had the COVID-19 pandemic day zero or patient zero, right? So that's how you can understand that one single day also has a lot of potential to change. So it's not even waiting for years for something to happen. Sometimes a single day can drastically change the course of history. Then you have, of course, the bombings of Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Those were also the turning points in history. And that is why the years teach much, but the days never know. But sometimes the single day can really teach you a lot. That is what the counter argument is, that the day in itself is not always, doesn't know things. It is also having some knowledge and wisdom in it, and certain times single days can really turn years of efforts, or years of knowledge can be accumulated in one single day, right? So this is how you can justify the counter argument. So what are the ideas, or what are the, you could say, so what do you learn out of it? You mean to say that carpe diem, like seize the day, that's how you say. Then Emily Dickinson has said that forever is composed of nows. So days are important. That's what Emily Dickinson has also said, that she's a very famous poet, and she was a very famous poet, and she has said that forever is composed of nows. So years teach much, which the days never know. No, the days come together to convert into years. So yes, the forever is composed of nows, and that's why we can't ignore the importance of the days. So these are the set of arguments that you can actually use to write this particular topic. Then we come to the introduction aspect, right? And introduction here. Now, what you could write about the introduction, because the theme is about wisdom. So maybe you have to pick up examples and personalities who are talking about the wisdom part, who maybe, invested a lot of time to gain experience, because your introduction should be able to justify the topic. Counter argument is okay, but you will never use the counter argument to actually, write your introduction. The counter argument is just one part of your essay, and it's usually having a less weightage, right? But then your introduction story, whatever you're going to write, or your major ideas in the body content should always justify the topic. And if your topic is trying to say that the years teach much, which the days never know, so you have to give your introduction where you have to emphasize the importance of the wisdom experience gained out of years, right? So here I have two examples for you. One is of course Darwin, and both of the, I have given you for the scientists, because usually we can see the scientists, keep on investing a lot of time into their researchers. They're very, very patient. They keep on investing time, energy, efforts, and then only they are able to get something. Then only their research is complete, or they are able to, discover something or invent something. So we have two scientists over here. One is Darwin. So Darwin, Charles Darwin, he spent over 20 years studying plants, animals, fossils, and even whatever notes he had made during the studying. So he kept on revising his notes, kept on referring to his notes, and then he was able to actually understand. And it was the slow accumulation of years of data that revealed the principle of natural selection. So Darwin, on just one single day, was not able to get knowledge and wisdom that, okay, the principle of natural selection or the survival of fittest happens like this. Over the 20 years, he had observed a lot of things. He had made certain notes. He had jotted down the data. He had jotted down the idea or whatever observations he had. And because of that, he was able to understand and take out the theory of principle of natural selection. Similarly, you have Galileo Galilei, right? His work was also spanned a lot of years, and then he spent year after year refining his telescopes, observing the skies, observing the universe and the planets and all. And he, because of the observation, he gained knowledge, and he kept on defending his heliocentric view against even the threats of persecution by the church, right? So his years of consistent night long vigils and observation, he was able to justify his heliocentric model, right? So over the period of time, the years teach much, which the days never know, and the years have taught these scientists, because to have patience to keep on observing things and then take out their theories and the thesis, right? Then you can also take movie reference, because if you're not so comfortable with using the same kind of personalities as introduction in your essays, you can use the movie reference. We have two movie examples over here. One very famous, Pursuit of Happiness. I'm sure you must all have seen this movie. So Pursuit of Happiness talks about, of course, a long journey of Chris Gardner, right? How he had to strive and, like, be in a lot of different places to actually earn money, to have a stable income. And it was a long life of, long years of suffering and long years of lost opportunities, and trying to, meet, you could say, the bare necessities of life. Then you also have the example of the Shawshank Redemption. If you have not seen this movie, I would recommend in your free time, do watch this movie, or even just, look at the summary. So this is a very, you could say, heart-moving story. A person was wrongly convicted of murdering his wife, and of course, the jail terms and all that was there, and he just kept on waiting for a lot longer period of time, I think lot of years. And during that time he was in the prison, he knew that of course he has to escape, because he knew that he will never be saved. It has been, he's wrongly convicted, but of course, there's nobody to save him now. So because the case cannot be reopened or something. So then he, sort of day by day dug out, a secret tunnel, and then after many years he escaped. When people were actually grown complacent, they were just like into, under the impression that he was a good man. One day he actually, broke free. Now this is something that it's not, going like, this story should not be used to justify breaking free from the prisons and all. But yes, because it's shown that he was wrongly convicted, and that is why he deserved peace, he deserved freedom. And his years of digging out the tunnel, secret tunnel and all, led to, you could say, eventually he became free. So you can use this example of the movie The Shawshank Redemption. I think it's an Oscar winner movie, very famous movie actually. You could even watch it for inspiration. Then for this kind of topic, what could be the conclusion? The conclusion should be that we need to mix. Now we will not justify in the conclusion either the aspect of only years being important and days not important, or days are very important and years do not matter. No, you have to create a balance. So sometimes if you get certain kind of topics where you have to justify A versus B, or maybe choose a side A or B, ideally I would say choose a middle part, choose a balance, choose C, right? So the C part is here what? That both are important. Human life should be balance of power of now, That means living the each moment, okay, being mindful, and of course accumulating wisdom patiently over years. So live today, but then also keep an eye out that, okay, how your days are coming together to give you wisdom, to give your experience, to make your life worthwhile, right? So the spiritual aspect of long human life is that time is the teacher of the soul. So time is teacher of the soul, and longevity is not. That means living a long life. So longevity is not merely biological survival. It is the unfolding of consciousness, chance to refine ego into humility and memory into legacy. So with a long life, with a long, years to live, you gain a lot of experience, and that gives you opportunity to turn your memory into legacy, your ego into humility, because there only wisdom can come through a long life of, long lived experiences. But then your days in it, that single day is also equally important. So create a balance in this kind of essay. As your conclusion, I've given you the idea how to actually write about it. You can add few quotes from your side, you can add more movie reference, poems, whatever you feel suitable to the topic, and you can make this essay a quite interesting one, right? So with this, I conclude the session. We have covered topic 2 and 6, and then I'll see you next week again, where I'll be discussing the topic 1 of section A and topic 5 of section B, and that will be the last part in the series of the discussions for 2025 Civil Services examination essay paper, right? Okay, so on this note, all the best, study well, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.